All right, beautiful people, we're going to bring in our guest for today. He is running for governor for the state of Michigan, police chief from the city of Detroit. We want to welcome to the show Chief James Craig. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, Paul, I appreciate you letting me come on your show. I'm excited. This is exciting times right now.
Anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody from Detroit, I'm honored.
Are you from Detroit?
No, I'm not from Detroit. I got my training in Detroit. Uncle Nat Morris, Montez
Nat
Miller,
Morris.
all them folks.
Oh, yes.
I got my start with them. And
Oh,
so,
yeah. I remember Nat Morris when I was a young pup here in Detroit growing up. Became a Detroit police officer in 1977. And, unfortunate circumstances, I got laid off and went to Los Angeles. So I spent almost 30 years of my career out in Los Angeles. So,
well, welcome to the show and welcome back to Michigan. You was a very, very popular police chief there in Detroit. What made you want to get into politics?
Well, I got to tell you, what a great question. I got to tell you, 44 years in public service, not political. That's very different. So when we make the distinction between political service and public service, public servants serve people. And I've had a passion all my career serving people from Detroit to Los Angeles, Maine, my first job as chief of police. And so and then Cincinnati, and then back home here to Detroit. This is my home.
This is home. This is a big task running against an incumbent governor who poll numbers is probably not as popular as she would like for to be. What makes you believe that you have the grit and that you have what it takes to beat what Detroit call Big Gretch?
Well, I don't embrace the Big Gretch notion. Somebody gave her that. Let me just say this. With Detroiters, Southeast Michigan got to ask, what is Big Gretch done for Detroit? My brand is Detroit. I grew up here. I live in Detroit. I was the chief of police for 8 years in Detroit. And I recognize that gubernatorial candidates who are Republican have not done very well in the city of Detroit, except for one. And this was my dad. My dad, who was a lifelong Democrat. I was a lifelong Democrat. My mom was a lifelong Democrat. But my dad raised me conservative. And he said, son, I voted for a Republican governor several times. And I said, why? He said, because he was a good man. I believed him. He was transparent. He was ethical. He was a Republican. And that was Governor Milliken. Yeah. Now, for those who know, Governor Milliken really collaborated in a very positive way with Coleman Young, who was the first African-American mayor of Detroit. And they built a great relationship, very positive for Detroiters. And Detroiters came out and supported Milliken. And so my dad said, even though you were a lifelong Democrat and you transitioned, here's what I know. Detroiters love you. They appreciate the job you did as police chief. They know I'm authentic. I have integrity. And those things really do matter. And because we're so partisan right now,
right,
left and right, Democrat, Republican, what benefit is that to our state? I can tell you none. What's beneficial to our state is the person that can bring folks together, even folks you can't agree with,
right,
and say, let's get it done for Michigan. Let's get it done for Michigan. I'm not a politician.
Question, Chief, what kind of assurance can you offer the community that you won't do what Rick Snyder did to Flint?
Well, let me just say this. What I do and what I have done, this is not something I read in a book. I get down in rooms with people who I don't always agree with, and I want to know what the issues. So let's, for a moment, digress from Rick Snyder, and let's talk about Gretchen Whitmer in Benton Harbor, which is also an African American enclave. I don't know if your show goes as far as Benton Harbor,
Yeah,
but Benton,
we streaming on right on radio station in Ben Harbor.
let
Yes.
me just say this, and Benton Harbor knows this. They reached out 3 years ago about the problems with water, and what was done? Nothing. It wasn't until, and this is the political part of it, and I don't know if it was the mayor of Benton Harbor, but there was a letter written to the feds, I think it was FDA, whoever it was, and said, look, we're not getting a response. We want a response. And all of a sudden, the state gets involved and says, they bring in water. Now, all of a sudden, we are the world. Let's hold hands and let's support Benton Harbor. Shameful.
Mm. Right.
So I say that to say my background, my history, I don't respond because of political interests or special interests. I respond because it's the right thing to do. And as the chief of Detroit, when I got here 8 years ago, I got to tell you, we went through bankruptcy. The community had no confidence in this police department. The police officers had no confidence in their administration. Local activists in Detroit had no confidence. I can give you names: Detroit 300, the Moors, Mothers Against Murdered Children. They had no confidence. The LGBTQ community, no confidence. But I went in rooms and I met with folks, not because me as a chief, because it was bigger than me. It was about the city of Detroit. As your governor, that's what I bring. I'm
What was
unafraid and unapologetic.
we talk about West Michigan. We talk about Muskegon Heights, who has a high school, a public school that is in debt, and the debt is continuing to grow, not because of mismanagement of money, it's because of lower enrollment and the increase in retirement costs that they have to pay the teachers. Um, the governor has the power, or whether she denied it or not, to write this debt off. Any kind of promises or any kind of assurance you can give to the citizens of this community that you will look at this debt and see if you can write this debt off, because it's holding Muskegon Heights hostage.
Well, let me just say this. I appreciate you bringing that up because I am a product of Detroit Public Schools. I am a product of Detroit Public Schools. Here's what I know about today's public school system. And I'm going to go around, I'm going to go back to your debt. So, for example, our children, by the time they get to third grade, Detroit Public Schools, only 8% can read. From there, I went up to Flint, which is another community of color. 10%. Third graders, by the time they're in third grade, only 10% can read. And then I went to Lansing, 25%. Public schools in our state, 45%. Here's the translation of that. We're setting ourselves up as a state for failure. Our state's illiterate, and it's mostly people of color, and it needs to be a number one priority. It has not been, and it's shameful. Now, when I was in school, and I'm probably many years older than you, and you probably smile at that, but I went to Cass Technical High School here in the city of Detroit. I had to work hard. Fortunately, I had parents that were encouraging, and I had high grades, went to engineering school because I wanted to be an automotive engineer. Of course, I took a sharp turn to become a cop. But I'm saying this: who's most affected by the literacy rate in our state? Poor communities, generally of color.
Right.
And I'm passionate about it.
How,
And,
Chief? How do you fix that, though? I mean, I
well,
agree with.
we have to give parents, first and foremost, parents, not special interests. I'm gonna say it again. Parents, not special interests, are stakeholders. Our schools have to be focused on who? Our children, our
Right.
students, not special interests. And look, let me just say this: teachers, they're like cops to me. Police officers are on the front line serving and protecting our communities. Teachers are building our future. I don't care about the unions. And Whitmer's last presentation of what she wanted to do, she wanted to throw money at teachers who showed up. No, no, no. It's not about showing up. It's about who's performing. We have to take care of our children. You know, what's interesting, and I'll share this story with you. When I was on my educational journey after launching my campaign, I went into Flint. And I thought I was going to meet a lot of parents from Flint. Instead, I met a sitting city council member from Flint who happened to be a parent. And I took a strong position on critical race theory. And I told her, I said, so we can teach children of color that they're oppressed. And if you're white, you're the oppressor. But yet, you are less concerned to teach children how to read by the time they're in the fourth grade. That's a problem for me. Because let me just say this: having grown up in the 70s, I wasn't anyone's victim. They told me I would never be a chief of police. Heck, some people say today I would never be the governor of the state of Michigan. I am not
Right.
oppressed. I am not a victim. I'm
Right.
an African American man who has fought for everything I've achieved in my professional career. And what I didn't know, even during my time in Los Angeles, Cincinnati, I used to go in and talk to children, middle school and high school. I said, has anyone ever told you you couldn't achieve certain goals? 75% of the room, the hands would go up. And I would say, wow, there's a problem. I thought, because of naivety and not understanding, that maybe it was just peer pressure. You know,
Right.
friend, you know, as a race, we would tear each other down. We've done it to a fault. But I got to tell you, no one gave you, you got what you got because of you and maybe a mentor, maybe your parents. Same with me.
Right.
We have got to inspire our children of color that they can succeed and they
Ch-
will succeed. Would you
Right.
agree with me on that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Just critical race theory. Just disclaimer. They're not even teaching history in our schools, so we don't. Even, we can't. Even, you're not even teaching that. So we don't. Even, that conversation about critical race theory don't even really exist in the school district. My grandkids go to because they're not even getting proper history. Period. They're not even getting taught history. So I
Right.
just believe that was just a national conversation to spark conversation. Heck, I had to take kids to the museum in Detroit from Muskegon so they can get some history. We had to take kids to DC to the museum so they can get history because they wasn't teaching it. So, but I want to go back. I want to go back to the school district because for Muskegon voters, this is very important. This Muskegon Heights Public Schools debt that they have with the school district, uh, the school district has that is lingering over their head that the citizens are continuing to pay. What could you do as governor to get them some kind of relief?
Here's what I'm thinking, and I don't have all the answers. So
Right.
I didn't know about the debt in Muskegon. But here's what I'm thinking as I'm having this conversation with you. All parents want their children to have what? A good education.
Exactly.
You know, it's not necessarily about going to college, but at least when you get out of college, I mean out of high school, you have to be able to read, especially now in today's environment. So I certainly support school choice, and I want parents, I don't care what race, that they can have school choice. Because if a parent, and if there's a parent who doesn't have the financial means, why wouldn't we make an opportunity available for them to go to a school where their children can get a good education? Look, if the public schools are underperforming, they need to be held accountable.
No
And,
doubt.
and maybe if these public school systems understood that they're in competition with public charter schools or private schools, magic would probably happen.
We got a question, online question from our co-host who's not on this conversation, but he got a question for you. What would you do about casinos here in Muskegon? And will you be pro police governor, or does he understand we need police reform, not defund, but reform?
Well, let me just say this. I'm all for ethical constitutional policing. You can't paint a police department with a broad brush. I've been in several police departments who are under federal consent decrees, but what we need to focus on, how do we keep our communities safe? How do we support the men and women who put their lives on the line every day? The problem we have, not just here in Michigan in some places, but across our country, we have demonized our police officers. Now, to the bad cops, they need to be held accountable. But that doesn't mean an entire police department is corrupt. But if there is a pattern and practice of corruption, then absolutely we need to address that issue.
Should the
So
police department reflect the community?
I believe that, going back into my own history, when Coleman Young, the first African American mayor of Detroit, Detroit Police Department had a history, a pattern and practice of racism, and Mayor Young wanted a police department that accurately reflected Detroit. Detroit was becoming probably the most African American community in the country. In fact, I think when I started in the 70s, the police department was largely white. And so my academy class was probably 90% African American and 25% women. And so he was in fact, Coleman Young was a national leader in integrating the police department.
Right.
Did it have a positive effect? I would say so. And so I do think a police department should accurately reflect, but let's not forget about officers who are non-Black in Black communities who serve with dignity and put their lives on the line every single day. I can't tell you how many non-Black officers, white officers, I have buried because they worked to keep our community safe.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, and that goes without question, no doubt. But all it takes is, I was a correction officer for 13 years. One bad cop can change a community because he's working 8 hours or 12 hours a day. One bad cop out of 100 is enough to put so many people in prison over his 20-year career that it impacts the community.
I'm going to offer you something a little different. I don't disagree with you, but what I will say to you, having been a chief, not in one city, 3 cities, when you have a bad cop, that one bad cop you talked about, it's important that the chief executive, in a very public way, hold that rogue criminal cop accountable in front of everybody. And when you do that, you build trust. Now, I don't know if you remember when I was chief in Detroit, we had 2 white police officers that demonized a young African-American girl. It was winter, middle of the night or late night, made her walk and said black girl magic. Do you remember that case?
I think I remember that case. Yeah.
I was very public with that case.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop there. Those 2 officers got fired, not just for that event. It was some other issues involved in that. But I didn't stop right there, because as we opened that investigation, it was important for me to find out if there was a systemic problem in that station. So I initiated a forensic audit. And when I initiated it, I found out there were other problems. I was transparent. I reported my findings to the community. I changed the leadership team of that station because it was important for me that we not have that. That's not common. That's not common.
Most exactly. And that was commendable. I mean, you was on point. That's why I like you. I followed your work as a police chief. Got a couple more questions because I know we only got like 8 more minutes left. The casino situation.
Oh, yes.
It's one signature away. Governor Whitmer, she signs it. It brings 3,000 jobs to Muskegon like that. 3,000 good paying jobs. And I want to know your perspective on this whole thing, because we understand that there's a lot of pressure from Detroit casinos to stop Muskegon from getting this casino. And
I'm glad you brought it up. Here's where I'm at with that. There's enough for all of us. If I was your governor, I would sign it. 3,000 jobs in Muskegon, a minority community, that's a win for me. Look, I'm about what's fair and what's right. Look, Detroit's got 3 casinos. Nothing's going to impact that.
Right.
Muskegon should have casinos. If this is going to be 3,000 jobs, what impact is that going to have on the Muskegon community? I will tell you. I think it will be profound. Let me just say this. I'm running as a Republican. Okay? That ain't real popular among many of our folks.
Right.
But here's what I know. I've been a conservative all my life. But one thing that I carry and I've always done in my professional career, it's about what's right and what's fair. And I have mentored so many, not just people of color, but those who worked hard based on merit. When I came to Detroit, as you know, Detroit was facing a bankruptcy.
Right.
I had to build a new team. And let me tell you about that team. And I'm so elated to talk about them. Black female went on to become the first African-American female chief of Dallas, Texas. That's one. Right now, Columbus, Ohio, first African-American police chief, and the number 2 first African-American female. Both females are running the Columbus Police Department. And not too far away in Southfield, Michigan, under my mentorship, Chief of Police, Southfield. My number 2 African-American female had an opportunity to go to Baltimore. She said, no, I'm staying with you.
Wow.
She was tapped for Michigan State Police. She said, no, I'm staying with you. And when I left, she left. Now she's an executive with Motorola Corporation. So I just use that as an example because, one, I know how to build teams. But I also know when selections are made, we got to level the playing field. I believe in merit. Nobody ever gave me anything. I had to work hard. And that's what I do when I mentor and inspire, particularly men and women of color. I said, look, life ain't fair. But
Right.
if you work hard, you study hard. And I know, and let me just say this. I was fortunate I had parents that inspired me as a young man, and not everyone has that. But I have had the opportunity to inspire young people of color and whites who have come up. To me, this is how you get it done. And when you bring people in and they believe in you as a leader, they will follow you. That's why when people ask me, well, Detroit didn't burn. Many big cities across America burned up. Grand Rapids here in our state, Kalamazoo, Lansing, they had riots in 2020.
Right.
Why not Detroit? I
Right.
believe in our community. I believe in the men and women, but I also believe that as a leader, you get out in front and you solve problems. And that's what we did here in Detroit.
A couple more
And I'm
minutes
going to
left.
do it for this state. I'm going to do it for this state. And I'm going to do it for Muskegon, Benton Harbor, Detroit, the entire, because I'm about Michigan.
Right. A question for you. During the pandemic, how do you feel Governor Whitmer leadership was during the pandemic? And I guess we're easing up out of the pandemic now.
We're easing out, but she failed. I'm going to tell you why. Look, none of us could have guessed or understood the impact the pandemic would have had on our state, on our cities. But when you, as a CEO, make unilateral decisions to shut down and a lot of small businesses, and I got to believe your town, Muskegon, was greatly affected by some of these shutdowns. And you got to ask yourself one question. Why? Was this based on science or was this based on politics? Here's what I know. This was political. This was political. And when you look at states like Florida and Texas, who, while they suffered too, they didn't shut schools down. They didn't shut businesses down. They flourished. And you got to ask yourself, why? So the problem I have is she didn't consult, didn't work collaboratively with the lawmakers and the people that we vote in to represent us. She unilaterally make decisions. I think if she had sat down with Republicans, Democrats, and said, look, we got a problem. I don't have all the answers. I'm not a scientist. What do we need to do? And the reason why I use that as an example, because when I came into Detroit, I met with the activist community in Detroit. They didn't trust the police department. They didn't very much like the police department. They probably didn't much like me. And I probably didn't like them. But it was bigger than me. What it was about the city of Detroit. And so this is not about ego. This is really about sitting down. What's in the best interest of Detroiters? With Michigan, what's in the best interest of Michigan?
Well,
I don't care where you come from. These small businesses, many of our businesses shut down. They couldn't recover from it. They got schools, for example, a minority community. That school superintendent made a bad decision to do what? Shut schools down indefinitely for virtual learning. We know that doesn't work.
Right.
How come the governor didn't step in and say, look, we got to keep our schools open. We need our children in school. Are we following the science or are we following politics? That's what it comes down to, my friend. It really
Chief
does.
James, no, I got to do the station ID. WBSLP 1037 Muskegon, Muskegon Heights. Police Chief James Craig, running for governor. Last thing, your website. How can people connect with you?
ChiefJamesCraig.com. ChiefJamesCraig.com. And I want to say as I close out, I appreciate you. Certainly, Mayor Walter Watts, who really connected me with you.
Yes.
I'm excited about our future. My commitment, I would ask anybody, just look me up. I'm consistent. I'm not a politician, but I guess I'm becoming a politician.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but what I am, I'm not a political servant. Political servants serve special interests.
Right.
I'm a public servant, and I've been a public servant for 44 years. I serve people, and guess what? I'm coming. I want to come to your studio in person, so we can have a face to face. I'm excited about our future. We're gonna do some great things.
Yep, we definitely got to have you back. Thank you. You are first candidate we have interviewed for the governor's race, and feel free. Let me know when you're going to be in West Michigan. We'll make the connection. Always good talking to you, Chief, and much
Thank you.
love and respect to you.
Much love to you too, my friend. Thank
All
you
right,
so
take care.
much.
All right,
Talk
go
to you.